Power is a fragile illusion. 1 minute, you are the apex predator, sipping champagne in a ballroom worth millions. The next, you are trembling on your knees, praying that the monster you created doesn't rip your heart out. November 14th. That was the night the Ashworth dynasty fell. It wasn't an army that destroyed them. It wasn't a biological weapon. It was a girl named Isolde, a girl whose name they couldn't even bother to remember until she turned into something the world hadn't seen in 500 years. This is the true story of how the weakest Omega in the state of Vermont became the nightmare of the American Council. Buckle up. It's going to get bloody. To understand the sheer magnitude of the violence that happened later, you have to understand the silence of Isolde Carter's life. In the werewolf world, your rank isn't just a social status. It's a biological imperative. If you are an alpha, your blood sings with command. If you are an omega, like Isolde, your bones ache with submission. Isolde worked at the Greystone Manor, the ancestral home of the Ashworth pack in northern Vermont. The Ashworths were old money. We are talking about the kind of family that owns senators and judges. The alpha, Richard Ashworth, was a man who believed that weakness was a disease. And in his eyes, Isolde was terminal. She was 21 years old, orphaned, and officially classified as wolfless. She hadn't shifted by her 18th birthday. In the brutal economy of the pack, this meant she was barely worth the food scraps she ate. Her day started at 4 a.m., scrubbing the marble foyer where the muddy boots of the Beta Guards had tracked in snow. "Mr. Spot, Carter," a voice sneered from above. Isolde froze. She knew that voice. It was Victoria Ashworth, the Alpha's daughter. Victoria was stunning, blonde, statuesque, and possessing a soul as black as rot. She was walking down the grand staircase with her arm linked through Liam Montgomery. Liam. Just thinking his name made Isolde's chest tighten. Liam was the future beta of the pack. He was kind, or at least he used to be. When they were children, before the hormones and the ranks set in, Liam had once bandaged Isolde's knee when she fell off a swing. He had given her a candy bar and told her she was brave. She had held on to that wrapper for 6 years. But now he was Victoria's property. "I'm sorry, Victoria," Isolde whispered, keeping her eyes on the floor. Eye contact was forbidden. "It's future alpha female to you, trash," Victoria laughed, kicking the bucket of soapy water. The dirty grey liquid sloshed all over Isolde's uniform, a thin, ragged grey dress that smelled of bleach. Isolde gasped as the cold water soaked her skin. She shivered, not just from the cold, but from the crushing weight of the command rolling off Victoria. Even without shifting, Victoria's wolf was present, pushing Isolde down. Liam shifted uncomfortably. "Vic, come on. We're going to be late for the council brunch." "Don't tell me you pity her, Liam." Victoria turned her sharp gaze to him. "She's a genetic dead end. Daddy says she shouldn't even be allowed indoors. She smells like nothing. No wolf. Just human sweat and fear." Liam looked at Isolde. For a second, just a fraction of a second, Isolde looked up. She saw conflict in his eyes. She saw a flicker of that boy who had fixed her knee. "Please," she begged silently. "Just say one nice word." Liam hardened his jaw. He looked away. "You're right, Vic. She's a mess. Let's go." The door slammed shut, leaving Isolde in a puddle of dirty water. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford the dehydration. She just wrung out her rag and kept scrubbing. But there was something strange happening to her body lately. A heat, not a fever, but a burning sensation in the marrow of her bones, specifically along her spine. It usually happened when she was angry. And today, watching the man she loved walk away with the woman who tormented her, the heat was unbearable. It felt like molten gold was trying to break through her skin. She ignored it. She had work to do. The winter solstice ball was in 2 days, the biggest event of the decade. And while she wasn't invited, she was expected to cook the feast for the 300 guests who were. The day of the winter solstice ball arrived with a blizzard. The Greystone Manor was a fortress of lights and luxury against the white storm. Limousines were pulling up the long driveway, depositing the elite of the werewolf world, the DuPonts from Louisiana, the Ivanovs from the Russian delegation, and the formidable Sebastian Vane. Sebastian Vane was a name whispered in fear. He was a rogue alpha, a man who ran a pack of mercenaries called the Iron Legion. He wasn't invited for his pedigree. He was invited because Alpha Richard Ashworth owed him money. A lot of it. In the kitchens, the heat was sweltering. Isolde had been chopping vegetables for 6 hours straight. Her hands were blistered. "Isolde!" The screech came from the service entrance. It was Beatrice, Victoria's personal maid. She looked frantic. "You need to come upstairs, now!" Isolde wiped her hands. "I can't. The head chef will kill me. Victoria is having a meltdown. She tore her dress. She demands a seamstress, and the appointed one is stuck in the snowstorm. You know how to sew, right? You fix your own rags all the time." Isolde hesitated. Going to the upper floors during a gala was punishable by a whipping. "I don't have permission." "Alpha Richard gave the order," Beatrice lied. You could tell she was lying by the way her pulse jumped in her neck. But Isolde had no choice. You don't say no to the Alpha's order. Isolde followed Beatrice up the back stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs. The house smelled of expensive perfume, roasted venison, and the heavy, musky scent of powerful wolves. They didn't go to Victoria's room, though. Beatrice shoved Isolde into a guest suite on the 3rd floor. "Wait here, I'll get the dress," Beatrice said, and locked the door. Click! Isolde spun around. "Beatrice?" Silence. The room was dark, lit only by the moonlight reflecting off the snow outside. On the bed there was a dress, but it wasn't Victoria's torn gown. It was a stunning emerald green silk slip dress, and next to it, a mask. A note lay on the pillow. The handwriting was messy, hurried. "Izzy, I know how they treat you. I'm tired of watching it. Put this on. Meet me in the library. I want to show everyone that rank doesn't matter. I want to claim you tonight." Liam. Isolde's breath hitched. She read the note 3 times. Liam? Was it possible? Had he been pretending to be cruel to protect her from Victoria until the right moment? The heat in her spine flared up again, hotter this time. Hope is a dangerous thing for an Omega. It makes you reckless. With trembling hands, she stripped off her uniform. She washed her face in the ensuite sink, trying to scrub away the grease of the kitchen. She put on the dress. It fit her perfectly, hugging curves she usually hid under baggy grey wool. She put on the mask. She looked in the mirror. For the first time in her life, she didn't look like a servant. She looked like a queen. She slipped out of the room and navigated the halls towards the library. The house was vibrating with music. She could hear the chatter from the ballroom below. She pushed open the heavy oak doors of the library. It was dimly lit, the fire crackling in the hearth. "Liam?" she whispered. A figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Liam. He looked dashing in a tuxedo, holding a glass of red wine. "You came?" he said, his voice thick. "I got your note," Isolde said, stepping closer. "Liam, are you sure? Victoria will—" "Forget Victoria," Liam said. He walked towards her, closing the distance. The air was thick with tension. He reached out and touched her cheek. "You look beautiful, Izzy. I always knew you were." Isolde closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. This was it, the fairy tale, the moment the weak Omega gets the prince. "I love you," she whispered. "I know," Liam said. And then the library lights flooded on, blindingly bright. "Surprise!" Isolde flinched, shielding her eyes. Laughter, roaring, cruel laughter. She blinked, her vision adjusting. The library wasn't empty. It was full. Victoria was there. Alpha Richard was there. Half the guests of the party were squeezed onto the mezzanine level, looking down. They were holding phones, recording. Liam pulled his hand away from her face as if he had touched acid. He smirked, his face twisting into a mask of mockery. "You actually thought," Liam said, his voice loud enough for the cameras, that a future alpha would mate with a kitchen rat, a wolfless defect. Victoria stepped forward, looking radiant and terrifying. "Oh, honey, we had a bet. Liam said you were too smart to fall for it. I said you were desperate enough to believe anything. Looks like I win $500. Isolde stood frozen. The emerald dress felt like it was shrinking, suffocating her. The shame was a physical blow, harder than any kick or punch. She looked at Liam. "But the note, I wrote it," Victoria giggled. "Liam just played his part." "Show us your wolf, pet," someone from the balcony shouted. "Oh wait, you don't have one." Alpha Richard stepped forward, looking bored. "This little entertainment has run its course. Isolde, you have stolen clothes from my daughter's closet. You have abandoned your post in the kitchen. And you have tried to seduce the future beta." "I didn't," Isolde choked out. "Liam!" Richard barked. "Punish her!" Liam hesitated. The crowd watched eagerly. To prove his loyalty to the elite, to prove he wasn't soft, he had to do this. Liam took the glass of heavy, dark red wine he was holding. He looked at Isolde, his eyes dead. "Know your place, Omega," he spat. He splashed the entire glass of wine into her face. The red liquid blinded her, dripping down the expensive silk dress, staining it like fresh blood. The crowd erupted in cheers and laughter. "Get out!" Victoria shrieked. "Before I have the guards drag you out by your hair." Isolde turned and ran. She ran blind, crashing into a side table, knocking over a priceless vase. She didn't stop. She burst out of the library doors, through the servants' corridors, and out the back door, into the blizzard. The cold hit her like a hammer. She was in a thin silk dress. It was 10 degrees below zero. She ran toward the forest, toward the tree line of the Blackwood Ridge. She didn't care if she froze. She didn't care if she died. She just needed to be away from the laughter. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing into a snowbank deep in the woods. The cold began to numb her limbs, her vision blurred. "This is it," she thought. "I die here." But the heat in her spine, it wasn't going away. It was exploding. As her human heart slowed down, something ancient woke up. It didn't feel like a wolf. Wolves are pack animals. They are social. This felt like a god. Crack! Her shoulder blade snapped. But she didn't scream. Snap! Her femur broke and reformed. Usually the first shift is excruciating. It takes minutes. Isolde shifted in 3 seconds. A burst of golden light, bright enough to illuminate the dark forest, exploded from her body. The snow around her melted instantly, turning to steam. When the steam cleared, Isolde was gone. Standing in her place was a wolf. But not a normal wolf. She was massive, standing 7 feet at the shoulder. Her fur wasn't grey or brown or white. It was gold. Pure, metallic, shimmering gold. Her eyes were violet, the colour of royalty. She threw her head back and let out a howl. It wasn't a howl of pain. It was a sound that shook the snow off the trees for miles. A sound that made every wolf in the Greystone Manor, 3 miles away, drop their champagne glasses and clutch their chests in primal terror. Deep in the shadows of the forest, a man watched. Sebastian Vane, the mercenary alpha, leaned against a tree, a cigarette burning in his hand. He had followed the scent of distress, expecting to find a dying girl. Instead, he was looking at a legend. He dropped his cigarette into the snow. "Well," Sebastian whispered to himself, a dark smile spreading across his face. "This changes everything." Isolde woke up to the smell of burning wood and expensive coffee. She wasn't dead. That was the first surprise. The second surprise was that she wasn't cold. She was lying in a bed that was bigger than her entire room back at Greystone Manor. The sheets were high thread-count grey cotton. The room was rustic, but screamed wealth. Exposed beams, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a snow-covered mountain range, and a fireplace large enough to roast a whole deer. She sat up, gasping. Her body felt different. The constant, aching fatigue that had plagued her for 21 years was gone. Her hearing was razor-sharp. She could hear the heartbeat of a squirrel outside the window. She could hear the blood rushing through her own veins. "Drink this, Black. No sugar." Isolde jumped, her claws, extending instinctively into the sheets. Sebastian Vane was sitting in a leather armchair in the corner, watching her over the rim of a mug. He wasn't wearing his tuxedo anymore. He was in tactical gear, black cargo pants, a tight thermal shirt that outlined terrifyingly large muscles, and combat boots. He looked like war personified. "Where am I?" Isolde's voice was raspy, but it carried a strange resonance, a vibration that made the glass of water on the nightstand tremble. "The Adirondacks," Sebastian said calmly. "My territory. The Iron Legion compound. You've been asleep for 3 days." 3 days? Isolde scrambled out of bed. She looked down at herself. She was wearing one of his t-shirts. Her legs, usually bruised and scarred from kitchen work, were flawless. The skin was milky white, glowing with health. "What happened to me?" Sebastian stood up. He was huge. At Greystone, people feared Alpha Richard, but Richard was a politician. Sebastian was a predator. He walked over to her, stopping a few feet away. "You shifted," he said simply. "And you didn't just turn into a wolf, Isolde. You turned into a gold." He picked up a remote and clicked a button. A flat-screen TV on the wall flickered to life. It was playing a news clip from a werewolf underground network. Unexplained seismic activity in northern Vermont. Witnesses report a blinding golden light. Ashworth Pack refuses to comment, but stock prices for Ashworth Industries have plummeted 15% this morning. Sebastian turned the TV off. "Do you know the history of our kind? The real history? Not the sanitized garbage they teach in schools?" Isolde shook her head. "I was a servant. I wasn't allowed to read the histories." "Figures," Sebastian scoffed. 500 years ago, there were no alphas, betas, or omegas. There were just the Aurelians, the golden wolves. They were the judges. They had the power to strip an alpha of his command with a single growl. They were the kings of the species. But the alphas got jealous. They banded together and hunted the Aurelians down. Extinction event. Or so we thought. He looked at her with intense, dark eyes. "You are an Aurelian, Isolde, a genetic throwback, a biological miracle. You are the only thing on this planet that can make a man like me kneel. Theoretically." Isolde backed away, hitting the wall. I can't be. I'm weak. I'm nothing." "You were nothing because your body was spending 20 years conserving energy to build that beast inside you," Sebastian said, stepping closer. "But now you are a nuclear weapon, and you have a choice." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. He tossed it onto the bed. "Richard Ashworth has declared you a rogue. He says you stole jewelry and fled. He has put a bounty on your head. $50,000. Any low-level hunter will be looking for you." Isolde looked at the phone. A picture of her face, a bad one, from her ID card, was plastered on a "wanted" poster. "They will kill me," she whispered. "They will try," Sebastian corrected. "Or we make a deal." Isolde looked up. "What kind of deal?" Sebastian smirked, a dangerous, jagged expression. "I have wanted to destroy the Ashworth line for 10 years. Richard Ashworth killed my younger brother in a border dispute and covered it up. I have the soldiers, I have the guns. But I don't have the political leverage to enter the High Council and expose him without starting a civil war." He pointed a finger at her. "You do. You are a gold. By ancient law, if you challenge him, the Council must let it happen. They cannot deny a royal challenge." "I don't know how to fight," Isolde said, her hands shaking. "I know how to peel potatoes and scrub floors." "I can teach you to fight," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "I can teach you to walk like a queen, talk like an assassin, and cut a man's throat with a dinner knife. I will give you the world, Isolde. I will make them beg for your mercy. All of them. Liam, Victoria, Richard." He held out his hand. It was rough, scarred and large. But in exchange, he said, when you take the Ashworth territory, you give half of their land to the Iron Legion, and you clear my name with the council. Isolde looked at his hand. She thought about Liam pouring the wine on her. She thought about Victoria's laugh. She thought about the cold snow and the feeling of dying alone. The heat in her spine flared. Her eyes flashed violet. She reached out and grasped Sebastian's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into his palm. "Deal," she said, "but I don't just want half their land, Sebastian." "Oh?" He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I want everything," she said, her voice turning to ice. "I want them to lose their money, their status, their homes. I want them to be the ones scrubbing floors. I want to break them." Sebastian threw his head back and laughed, a genuine, booming sound. "I think I'm going to enjoy working with you, Your Majesty." 6 months later. The transformation wasn't a montage. It was hell. For 6 months, Isolde didn't see the sun unless she was running under it with a 50-pound rucksack on her back. Sebastian was a ruthless teacher. He didn't treat her like a fragile princess. He treated her like a recruit. She learned Krav Maga from a former Israeli commando who was part of Sebastian's pack. She learned corporate law and finance from a disgraced Wall Street shark who managed the Legion's money. She learned how to shift seamlessly, calling forth the golden wolf, whom she named Aura, and retracting her in the blink of an eye. But the hardest lesson was psychological. "Stop looking down," Sebastian would yell during dinner. "You look at the floor, you die. Look me in the eye. Command the space." It took 3 months for Isolde to stop flinching when someone raised a hand. It took 5 months for her to learn to walk in 6-inch stilettos while carrying a concealed dagger. By the 6th month, Isolde Carter was dead. In her place stood someone else entirely. The setting, the Grand Elysium Hotel, New York City. It was the night of the Spring Equinox Summit. This was the event where the 12 major alphas of the East Coast met to discuss territory, trade, and treaties. The Ashworths were hosting. The ballroom was draped in silver and blue. Champagne flowed like water. Alpha Richard Ashworth stood at the podium, looking smug. Beside him, Victoria looked bored, tapping on her phone. And Liam looked tired. Rumors were swirling. The Ashworth pack was bleeding money. Their investments were failing mysteriously, courtesy of Sebastian's financial sabotage, though they didn't know that. They needed this summit to secure a loan from the Ivanov pack. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard boomed into the microphone, "tonight we celebrate unity. We celebrate the strength of the hierarchy." The doors to the ballroom swung open. Usually, late arrivals sneak in, but these doors didn't just open. They were thrown wide by 2 massive guards wearing the insignia of the Iron Legion. The room went silent. The Iron Legion was considered a criminal organization by polite society. What were they doing here? Sebastian Vane walked in. He looked devastating in a bespoke black tuxedo, his hair slicked back, radiating an aura of violence constrained by manners. But no one was looking at Sebastian. On his arm was a woman who sucked the air out of the room. She wore a dress made of liquid gold chainmail that clung to every curve of her body, with a slit that went up to her hip. Her back was bare. Her hair, once a mousy brown, was now a glossy chestnut cascade that reached her waist. But it was her face that froze the blood in Liam Montgomery's veins. She was wearing a mask, a delicate gold filigree mask that covered only her eyes. But the mouth, he knew that mouth. "Who is that?" Victoria whispered, clutching Liam's arm. "She's intimidating." Sebastian guided the mystery woman to the center of the room. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. They walked straight up to the podium where Richard stood. "Alpha Vane," Richard sneered, though his voice wavered. "You weren't invited, and you brought a whore to my summit?" The room gasped. Sebastian didn't speak. He just stepped back, leaving the woman standing alone in front of the Ashworth family. She looked at Richard. Then she looked at Victoria. Finally, she landed her gaze on Liam. She reached up and slowly untied the ribbon of her mask. The mask fell to the floor with a metallic clang. The silence was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. "Hello, Father," she said to Richard, mockingly, of course, as he was her alpha, not her dad. "Hello, Victoria. Hello, Liam." Liam dropped his champagne glass. It shattered, spraying glass over Victoria's shoes. "Isolde," Liam breathed. "That's impossible. You're dead. You died in the woods." "Isolde!" Victoria shrieked, her face turning purple. "The maid? You let the maid in here?" Isolde smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I'm not a maid anymore, Victoria." Richard's face went red. "Guards, remove this trash. Kill her this time." 4 beta guards rushed forward, batons raised. Isolde didn't move. She didn't shift. She just let it out. She released a fraction of her Aurelian aura. It wasn't a physical blow. It was a wave of pure, crushing dominance. Boom! The 4 guards dropped to their knees instantly, sliding across the polished floor. They whined, pressing their foreheads into the ground, unable to look at her. Their wolves recognized a queen, even if their human minds were confused. The shockwave hit the crowd. Every alpha in the room, powerful men who ran cities, stumbled back, clutching their chests. The urge to kneel was overwhelming. Isolde stepped over the prostrate guards and walked up the steps to the podium. Richard Ashworth, the man who had terrified her for her entire life, was shaking. His alpha wolf was cowering inside him, whimpering at the presence of the gold. Isolde leaned into the microphone. "My name is Isolde Carter," she announced, her voice echoing through the hall and the live stream cameras broadcasting to the werewolf world. "I am the Golden Wolf, and I'm here to conduct a performance review of the Ashworth administration." She turned to Richard, her eyes glowing a vibrant, terrifying violet. "You failed," she whispered. Then she turned to the crowd. "The Ashworths are bankrupt. They are morally corrupt. And as of this moment, I am challenging Richard Ashworth for the position of Alpha of the Greystone Pack." "You can't!" Victoria screamed, though she was hiding behind Liam. "You're a servant. You have no bloodline." Isolde laughed. "My bloodline is the law, Victoria, and yours is about to be extinct." She looked at Sebastian, who was leaning against a pillar, smiling proudly. "Alpha Ashworth," Isolde said, kicking off her high heels so she stood barefoot on the stage. "Shift. Let's finish what you started in the library." Richard roared, his ego finally overriding his fear. "I will tear your throat out, you ungrateful bitch." His bones cracked as he shifted into a massive, dark grey wolf. He was large, experienced, and vicious. He lunged at her, jaws snapping for her neck. The crowd screamed. Isolde didn't shift. Not yet. She waited until his jaws were inches from her face. Then she sidestepped with a speed that the human eye couldn't track. She grabbed the fur of his neck with her human hand and slammed his head into the podium. Crack! The wood splintered. Richard yelped, scrabbling to get up. "Is that it?" Isolde asked, looking down at him. "Is that the power of the Ashworth line?" She stepped back, giving him room to recover. "Get up. I want you at your best when I break you." Richard shook his massive head, snarling. He circled her, looking for an opening. "Liam!" Richard roared, in wolf speak, intelligible to the pack. "Help me! Kill her!" Liam stood frozen. He looked at the golden goddess on the stage, and then at the frantic, slobbering wolf that was his alpha. "Liam!" Victoria pushed him. "Do something!" Liam took a step forward. Isolde turned her violet gaze on him. "One step, Liam. Take one step, and I burn you first." Liam stopped. He looked at his hands, the hands that had poured wine on her. He looked at her eyes, and for the first time in his life, he made a smart decision. He stepped back. "No," Liam whispered. "I won't fight a gold." "Traitor!" Victoria shrieked. Isolde turned back to Richard. "Looks like you're alone, Richard. Just like I was." The air around Isolde began to shimmer. The heat rose. The gold was coming. "Now," Isolde said, her voice layering with the growl of the beast. "Let me show you a real wolf." The air in the ballroom crackled with static electricity, the kind that raises the hair on your arms before a lightning strike. Richard Ashworth, in his massive grey wolf form, was snarling, saliva dripping onto the expensive parquet floor. He was huge, a testament to decades of good feeding and power, but he looked small compared to the pressure building around the girl standing barefoot before him. Isolde closed her eyes. She didn't just shift, she unleashed. It started with a sound, a low, resonant hum that vibrated in the chest of every guest. Then the light. It didn't burst outward. It poured out of her skin like liquid fire, her bones rearranged with a sickening, wet crunch that she didn't even flinch at. When the light faded, the ballroom was silent. Standing where the girl had been was the golden wolf. She was a nightmare of beauty. Her fur was not just yellow, it was metallic, each strand reflecting the chandeliers above like spun bullion. She was a foot taller than Richard. Her claws were black obsidian. Her eyes were two pools of glowing violet plasma. Richard hesitated. His instinct, the primal part of his brain, screamed at him to roll over and expose his throat. But his pride, the arrogance of an Ashworth, forced him to attack. He lunged, aiming for her hind legs to hamstring her. Isolde didn't even turn. She simply sidestepped, a blur of gold motion, and slammed her hip into his flank. The impact sounded like a car crash. Richard flew across the room, smashing into the buffet table. Silver platters of lobster and caviar went flying. He yelped, a high-pitched sound that embarrassed his pack members watching from the sidelines. He scrambled up, shaking off the cocktail sauce, and roared. He charged again, this time feinting left and snapping at her throat. Isolde caught him. She didn't dodge. She caught his open jaw with one paw, her claws digging into his snout, and pinned his head to the floor. She leaned down, her massive golden jaws hovering inches from his exposed neck. She growled, a sound that translated clearly into the minds of everyone present. "Is this the alpha who ruled me? You fight like a pup." She bit down. Not to kill, but to maim. She tore a chunk of fur and flesh from his shoulder. Richard howled in agony. She tossed him aside like a rag doll. He skidded to a halt at Victoria's feet. Victoria screamed, backing away from her bleeding father. "Daddy!" Richard shifted back to human form. He was naked, bleeding heavily from his shoulder, shivering on the floor. He looked pathetic. He looked weak. Isolde shifted back. The transition was smooth, almost elegant. She stood there, breathless but unharmed, the gold dress miraculously reforming. A trick of high-level shifting magic Sebastian had paid a fortune to teach her. She walked over to Richard. She placed a bare foot on his chest. "I yield!" Richard wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips. "I yield! You are the alpha." "I know I am," Isolde said coldly. "But I don't want your title, Richard. I want your life." A gasp went through the room. "Please," Richard begged, clutching her ankle. "I'll leave. I'll go into exile. Just let me live." Isolde looked around the room. She saw the faces of the people who had mocked her for years. She saw the head chef who had burned her hands. She saw the guards who had kicked her. "Death is too easy for you," Isolde said. She looked at Sebastian. "Do we have the collars?" Sebastian stepped forward, grinning like a shark. He snapped his fingers. 2 Legion soldiers marched in, carrying a heavy metal box. Inside were 3 collars made of dull, rusted iron, silver-lined dampener collars. They prevented a wolf from shifting and caused constant, low-level pain. "These are illegal," Liam whispered, horrified. "So was starving a child," Isolde shot back. She picked up a collar. She threw it at Richard. "Put it on." With trembling hands, the former alpha clasped the iron around his own neck. He slumped as his connection to his wolf was severed. Isolde turned to Victoria and Liam. "You two as well!" No, Victoria shrieked. I am a high-born lady. I will not. Isolde didn't speak. She just flared her violet eyes. Victoria's knees buckled under the command. Weeping, Victoria crawled forward and put on the collar. Liam looked at Isolde. Izzy, please. We were friends. I loved you once. You loved your status more, Isolde said, her voice devoid of emotion. Collar. Now. Liam put it on. Isolde addressed the room. The Ashworth reign is over. This territory now belongs to the Iron Legion. And as for these three, she pointed to the grand staircase, take them to the servants' quarters in the basement. They will live in the boiler room. They will wake up at 4 a.m. They will scrub the floors. And if I see a single speck of dust... She leaned in close to Victoria's tear-streaked face. I will whip you myself. As the guards dragged the screaming Ashworths away, Sebastian walked up to Isolde and handed her a glass of champagne. That was poetic, he murmured. But don't get too comfortable, Your Majesty. Isolde took a sip, her hands finally shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Why? Sebastian nodded towards the entrance. Because you just publicly humiliated a council-backed alpha. The real war just started. 3 days later, the Greystone Manor was unrecognizable. The Iron Legion had moved in. The tacky velvet drapes were gone, replaced by tactical maps and austere furniture. The perimeter was patrolled by wolves who knew how to kill, not just how to pose for photos. Isolde sat in the Alpha's office. Her office now. She was reading the ledger books. Richard hadn't just been bad with money. He had been embezzling from the council. This is good, she muttered to Sebastian. We can use this. It won't matter if they execute you for being an abomination, Sebastian said, cleaning a large, serrated knife. They're coming today. Within the hour. As if on cue, the sound of helicopter blades chopped through the mountain air. Isolde walked to the window. 3 black helicopters, sleek and unmarked, were landing on the front lawn. The snow whipped around them in a frenzy. Men in grey suits stepped out. They weren't soldiers. They were worse. They were justiciars. Leading them was Magnus Blackwood. Magnus was a legend in the worst way. He was the High Counselor of the Eastern Seaboard. He was 300 years old, though he looked 40. He was a warlock-wolf hybrid, capable of using blood magic. He had wiped out the last known golden wolf lineage in the 1800s. He looks friendly, Isolde said dryly. He's here to kill you, Izzy, Sebastian said, his voice tight. If this goes south, you run. I'll hold them off. Isolde turned to him. I'm done running. They met the delegation in the grand hall. Isolde sat on the Alpha throne, wearing a simple black suit. Sebastian stood at her right hand. Magnus Blackwood walked in. He was tall, thin, and pale, with eyes that looked like broken glass. He didn't bow. Isolde Carter, Magnus said, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering on pavement. You are accused of unlawfully seizing a council seat, maiming a recognized alpha, and utilizing forbidden blood magic to mimic the Aurelian form. I didn't mimic anything, Isolde said, remaining seated. I am Aurelian. Magnus laughed softly. Impossible. We killed them all. You are a mutation, a cancer, and we are the surgeons. He raised a hand. Seize her! 6 justiciars moved forward. They pulled out rods made of white oak, weapons designed to paralyze wolves. Touch her and you lose the hand, Sebastian growled, stepping forward, his own men raising their assault rifles. Sebastian Vane, Magnus sneered. The rogue dog. Do you really think your bullets can stop council magic? Let's find out, Sebastian said, disengaging the safety on his rifle. Stop, Isolde commanded. She stood up. She walked down the steps of the dais toward Magnus. The justiciars tensed, but she ignored them. She stopped 2 feet from the High Counselor. You're afraid, she said softly. Magnus's eye twitched. I fear nothing, girl. You're terrified, she corrected. You're not here because I broke the law. Richard broke the law every day. You're here because my existence proves that your history books are lies. You didn't kill the Aurelians because they were tyrants. You killed them because they could do this. Isolde didn't shift. She didn't need to. She reached into the well of power deep inside her, the golden connection that linked her to every wolf on earth. She looked at the 6 justiciars. "Kneel!" She didn't shout it. She thought it. She projected the command directly into their blood. The justiciars froze. Their faces contorted in agony as their own wolves fought against their human training. The golden command was absolute. It bypassed loyalty, logic, and magic. It was biological law. One by one, the justiciars dropped their white oak rods. One by one, they fell to their knees, bowing their heads to the floor. Magnus watched in horror. He began to chant, a dark, guttural spell, his hands glowing with green, necrotic energy. He launched a bolt of magic straight at Isolde's heart. "No!" Sebastian shouted, diving in front of her. But Isolde was faster. She caught the bolt of magic. She physically caught it. Her hand glowed gold, absorbing the green energy, twisting it, neutralizing it. "You have forgotten," Isolde whispered, her eyes turning full violet. The Aurelians were the judges of magic, too. She crushed the energy in her hand, dispersing it into harmless sparks. She grabbed Magnus by the throat and lifted him off the ground. For a 300-year-old warlock, he was surprisingly light. "I demand a high trial," Isolde announced to the room, her voice booming with authority. "By the ancient laws of the First Pack, you cannot execute me without a trial before the full council." Magnus clawed at her hand, gasping for air. "They will destroy you." "Let them try," Isolde said. She dropped him. Magnus fell to the floor, coughing and wheezing. He looked up at her with pure hatred. "You have your trial, girl," he spat. "1 week, the Solstice Court. If you cannot prove your lineage is pure, if you cannot prove you are fit to rule, we will not just kill you. We will erase you from history." "Get out of my house," Isolde said. Magnus scrambled up, signaled his men, who were groggily standing up, looking confused and ashamed, and retreated. As the doors closed, Isolde swayed. The display of power had drained her. Sebastian caught her before she fell. "You okay?" he asked, holding her steady. "I just declared war on the entire government," she said with a weak smile. "Yeah, you did." Sebastian grinned. "It was hot." Isolde laughed, but her eyes were serious. "We have 1 week, Sebastian. We need leverage. We need to find out why they really killed the Golds. We need to find the archives." "The archives are lost," Sebastian said. "Burned centuries ago." "Not all of them," a voice came from the shadows. They turned. Standing in the doorway of the servants' entrance was an old woman. It was Martha, the elderly laundress who had worked at Greystone for 50 years. She was a mute Omega who had never spoken a word to anyone. "Martha?" Isolde asked. Martha walked forward. She stood straight, shedding the hunch of a servant. Her eyes were clear and sharp. "My name is not Martha," the old woman said, her voice crisp and educated. "My name is Seraphina Aurelius, and I have been waiting for you, granddaughter." Isolde froze. Sebastian's hand went to his gun. "Granddaughter?" Isolde whispered. "The bloodline didn't die out," the old woman said, smiling sadly. "We went underground. We hid in the mud, in the kitchens, in the places the alphas were too proud to look. We waited for the gene to resurface." She reached into her apron and pulled out a heavy, leather-bound book, wrapped in oilcloth. "This is the Book of Origin," she said. "It contains the names of every council member who betrayed us. It contains the proof of their crimes. If you bring this to the Solstice Court, you won't just win your life, you will topple the entire regime." Isolde looked at the book. Then she looked at Sebastian. "Looks like we're going on a road trip," Sebastian said. Isolde took the book. "No, we're going to a revolution." The Solstice Court was not a building. It was a ruin built into the side of a dormant volcano in Iceland. It was neutral ground, ancient and steeped in blood. The amphitheater was packed. Every alpha, dignitary, and warlord from across the globe had gathered. They weren't there for justice. They were there to watch the execution of the golden abomination. Isolde stood in the center of the obsidian pit. She was no longer the girl in the grey rags. She wore a suit of white combat armor, customized by the Iron Legion, with the crest of the golden wolf painted on the chest. Sebastian stood at her back, his rifle replaced by a ceremonial broadsword, looking like a god of war. High above them, in the stone box seats, sat the Council of 12. Magnus Blackwood sat in the center, looking down with a sneer of anticipation. "Isolde Carter," Magnus's voice boomed, amplified by magic. "You stand accused of heresy. You claim a bloodline that was extinguished for the safety of our species. You bring a rogue army to our holy ground. How do you plead?" Isolde looked up. Her eyes were already glowing violet. The cameras droned around her, broadcasting this moment to millions. "I plead," Isolde said, her voice clear and steady, "that you are a liar." Gasps rippled through the stands. "Insolence!" Magnus roared. "Executioner, bring her head!" A massive gate opened, and a genetically modified berserker, a beast standing 9 feet tall, pumped full of rage serum, charged into the pit. Sebastian stepped forward, his hand on his sword. "No," Isolde said, stopping him with a touch. "They need to see." Isolde walked towards the charging beast. She didn't flinch. When the berserker was 5 feet away, raising a massive axe, Isolde simply spoke. "Sleep!" The word wasn't spoken, it was detonated. A shockwave of golden light erupted from her, hitting the berserker. The monster's eyes rolled back, and it collapsed mid-stride, skidding to a halt at her feet, snoring loudly. The stadium went dead silent. Isolde reached into her pack and pulled out the Book of Origin. She held it up high. "You told the world that the Aurelians were tyrants. Then," she shouted, turning to face the crowd, "you told us they were mad. But I have the records, kept by Seraphina Aurelius, the woman you thought was a mute laundress for 50 years. She opened the book. November 14th, 1420. The founding council creates the Alpha hierarchy to consolidate wealth. They realize the Aurelians, the natural judges of our species, would never allow the hoarding of territory. So you murdered them." She pointed a finger at Magnus. "You didn't kill my ancestors to save the wolves, Magnus. You killed them because they could do this." Isolde slammed her hand onto the ground. The volcano rumbled. The obsidian floor cracked. Golden light flooded the cracks, forming a massive, glowing seal beneath the entire amphitheater. "I invoke the right of supremacy!" Isolde screamed. The right was a myth, a legend. It was said that a golden wolf could force every wolf in a 10-mile radius to show their true nature. "Show us!" Isolde commanded. The light blasted upward, hitting the council box. The illusions fell. Magnus Blackwood screamed as his disguise melted away. He wasn't a noble wolf. The light revealed the dark, twisting shadows of blood magic clinging to him like parasites. It revealed the magical tethers connecting him to hundreds of enslaved Omegas, draining their life force to keep him young. The crowd roared in horror. They saw the truth. Their leaders weren't gods. They were vampires, feeding on the weak to maintain their power. "They are feeding on us!" An alpha from the crowd shouted. "She's telling the truth!" Chaos erupted. The crowd surged forward. Magnus, realizing his reign was over, drew a jagged dagger. "Kill her! Kill her now!" He leapt from the box, falling 40 feet into the pit, aiming straight for Isolde. He was fast, unnaturally so, powered by stolen magic. Sebastian moved, but he wasn't close enough. Isolde didn't need him to be. She caught Magnus in midair. She didn't use her hands. She used her aura. The golden light solidified, wrapping around Magnus like a giant fist, suspending him helplessly in the air. She walked up to him. He struggled, spitting curses. "You wanted to erase me," Isolde whispered, her eyes burning with violet fire. "So I will erase you." She placed her hand on his forehead. "I strip you of your rank," she intoned. "I strip you of your wolf. I strip you of your magic." Magnus shrieked, a sound that haunted those who heard it for the rest of their lives. The black magic was ripped out of him. His youth evaporated. In seconds, he withered into a frail, shriveled old man, barely able to breathe. She dropped him. He lay in the dust, a human shell. Isolde turned to the council. The remaining 11 members were trembling, their hands raised in surrender. Isolde looked at the crowd. The thousands of wolves who had been mocking her minutes ago were now kneeling, not out of fear, but out of awe. Sebastian walked up to her. He took her hand and raised it high. "Behold," Sebastian's voice carried over the wind, "Isolde of the House Aurelius, the Golden Wolf, the Apex Queen." The chant started low, then became a roar that shook the mountain. "Long live the Queen! Long live the Queen!" 2 weeks later, the world was different. The council was dissolved. A new Senate was formed, with representatives from Alphas, Omegas, and Betas alike. At Greystone Manor, the basement was cold. Victoria Ashworth scrubbed the concrete floor, her hands raw. Liam Montgomery was hauling coal into the furnace. They were tired. They were hungry. Above them, in the main hall, a TV was playing. It showed the coronation. Isolde sat on a throne of gold and iron. She looked radiant. Beside her, standing as her equal, as her consort and general, was Sebastian Vane. He looked at her not with possession, but with absolute devotion. And finally, the reporter on the TV said, "Queen Isolde has announced a new law. No wolf shall be judged by their rank at birth, but by the content of their character." Liam stopped shoveling. He looked at the screen, at the woman he had thrown away for a title that no longer existed. A single tear cut through the coal dust on his face. "She looks happy," he whispered. "Shut up and dig," Victoria snapped, though she was weeping too. Back in the palace, Isolde turned off the cameras. She kicked off her heels and leaned back on the throne. "Tired?" Sebastian asked, rubbing her shoulders. "Exhausted," Isolde smiled, leaning her head back against him. "Ruling the world is hard work." Sebastian kissed her forehead. "Good thing you have a very dangerous, very devoted alpha to handle the paperwork." Isolde laughed. She pulled him down for a kiss. Outside, the snow was falling, but inside, the golden fire burned bright, warm, and eternal. The Omega was gone. The Queen had risen. That, my friends, is the story of Isolde Carter, from a scullery maid scrubbing floors to the Apex Queen, who brought an entire corrupt empire to its knees. It's a reminder that true power doesn't come from a title, a rank, or a bank account. It comes from the fire inside you that refuses to burn out, no matter how much cold water or red wine the world throws in your face. The Ashworths learned the hard way that you should never mock the weak, because you never know what kind of monster is sleeping inside them, waiting for the right moment to wake up. Now, I have a question for you. If you were Isolde, would you have shown mercy to Liam and Victoria, or would you have taken a darker revenge? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of revenge, romance, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next part of our werewolf romance saga. Until next time, keep your pack close and your enemies closer.